right, so we're diving into some serious Jane Austen territory today. Chapters 19 through 25 of Pride and Prejudice he handed to us. And let me tell you, things are really heating up at Longbourn. Just to quickly recap, the Bennet sisters, well, they're in this race to the altar. To secure their future, they need to marry well. And with all these eligible bachelors like Mr. Bingley around, the pressure's really on.
Yeah, Austen doesn't waste any time, does she? Right away, she just throws us right into all these complicated marriage issues of that time. Like right off the bat, we get Mr. Collins' proposal to Elizabeth. Not exactly the most romantic proposal, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. More like a train wreck you can't look away from. He lists these reasons for marriage. It's like his grocery list. It's the right thing for a clergyman. It'll make him happier. And Lady Catherine pretty much told him to. Love Elizabeth's feelings. Not even a thought.
It's incredible how Austen just uses this proposal to kind of make fun of all the pressures around marriage back then, Mr. Collins, he's like the poster boy for this idea that marriage is just like a business deal, a transaction for status, for money. He even says it would be better if Elizabeth wasn't rich, but just enough to make a small income last. He's practically shopping for a housekeeper with a dowry.
It's so ridiculous and just awful at the same time. And then you see Mrs. Bennet, even though she thinks Mr. Collins is a joke, she's still pushing Elizabeth to say yes. It really shows you how few options women had back then. Marriage wasn't like a personal choice, It was how they survived. And for families like the Bennets, marrying well, that was everything.
Oh, yeah, and Elizabeth refusing. Her father's amused, but her mother, total meltdown. I think it's really interesting how Austen shows us their different reactions. Mr. Bennet, he seems to get Elizabeth, her independence. But Mrs. Bennet, she's horrified. Like, Elizabeth's breaking all the rules, says a lot about what they value and, what they think a daughter's for.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, what if Mr. Bennet hadn't stuck up for Elizabeth? Would she have been forced to just give in? To marry Collins just to, be safe?
Yeah, not a very pleasant thought. And it makes Elizabeth seem even braver, doesn't it? She's willing to risk everything, social disgrace, poverty, all of it, just to be true to herself, to what she believes. She's not going to settle for a life of fake smiles and climbing the social ladder.
Which brings us to another big theme that Austen's setting up here. This whole idea of how dangerous first impressions can be. Like right away, Elizabeth hates Collins, thinks Wickham is charming, and Darcy. Totally arrogant and snobby. But are those judgments right? Austen, being the genius storyteller she is, she plays with this whole idea of what you see versus what's real.
Right. Take Wickham, all his sad stories, right? He's so good at making himself the victim. Of Darcy's cruelty, of course. He knows exactly what to say to get sympathy. And Elizabeth, she's smart, but she can be impulsive. And she falls for it, hook, line, and sinker.
He's like the perfect wounded hero. And Elizabeth, she already doesn't like Darcy, so she totally believes him. It makes you think, how much of what we believe is just based on what we're told? Something to think about as we go deeper into the story.
And the really cool thing about Austen is she doesn't give you easy answers. It's all these different sides of the story, and you have to figure out who's telling the truth. Like Jane and Bingley, he disappears. Does he not care? Or is it his sisters meddling like Elizabeth thinks? Is Bingley really that nice, or is he just easily influenced,
It's like a big puzzle, all these pieces, and we're trying to put it together. And just when you think you're getting close, Austen throws in a new twist.
Oh, speaking of twists, Charlotte Lucas decides to accept Mr. Collins. Total shocker, right? It shocks Elizabeth. I think it shocks a lot of people even now. Why would anyone choose to be with Mr. Collins, knowing what he's like?
It's so different from Elizabeth's refusal. And it kind of slaps you in the face with, how things really were back then. For women like Charlotte, marriage wasn't about love. It was about having a roof, having food. She's practical. To her, marriage is just a deal.
Yeah, she's not pretending about Collins. She knows he's got problems. But security, that's what matters to her, not romance. It was a choice lots of women had to make. Makes you think about how society can trap people, how different people see marriage.
It's so different from how Elizabeth sees it, right?
Yeah.
She's all about love. Makes you think, what would you do? Choose love like Elizabeth or security like Charlotte? It's a tough one, and Austen really shows us both sides.
It's a question that still matters, doesn't it? Even if things are different now. This whole thing of, do you do what you're told or what makes you happy? We all deal with that. But maybe you should switch gears a bit. talk about this contrast between real love and just, social climbing. You see it most with the sisters and the men they're interested in.
Oh, yeah. Elizabeth likes Wickham because she thinks he's actually a good guy, right? One who was wronged by Darcy. And Jane's falling for Bingley because he seems so kind and charming. But in both cases, there's more to the story.
Exactly. Whittam's a pro at manipulating people. He uses his charm, all those fake stories, to make Elizabeth like him even more, and dislike Darcy, of course. And Bingley's sisters, they're working behind the scenes, trying to get him away from Jane, trying to hook him up with someone richer, more important. Classic social climbing.
Totally different from how Elizabeth and Jane are with each other. Their relationship, it's so real in all this mess. They really get each other, They laugh together. It's like a breath of fresh air compared to all this stuffy society stuff.
And the interesting thing is, Austen uses these different relationships to show us, why people do things. Elizabeth and Jane, they're driven by love and being good. But Miss Bingley, even Charlotte, they make choices based on getting ahead. It's like she's holding up a mirror to society, showing how people deal with all these things, love, ambition, and the need to fit in.
Absolutely. And talking about mirrors, we should talk about our two main characters for this deep dive. Elizabeth Bennet, our sharp-tongued Harrian. She's a force of nature, honestly. Intelligent, independent, and she will not let society tell her what to do. You can't help but root for her, even when she's a little too quick to judge.
She's not perfect, but that makes her, I don't know, more human, more like us. I think that's why Austen's characters stay with you. They're real people, with good and bad. But then on the other side, we have Mr. Collins. Awkward, ambitious, and completely clueless. He's so into himself and how important he thinks he is, he can't see how ridiculous he is.
He's like a cartoon of awkwardness and just misplaced confidence. And Austen's writing, the way she describes him, is just, it's genius. That pompous cone, the way he doesn't realize how he sounds, it's almost painful to read, but in a good way. You could just hear his voice, all fake modesty and bragging.
Oh, remember when he proposes, he says, "Believe me, my dear Miss Elizabeth, that your modesty, so far from doing you any disservice, rather adds to your other perfections." He's literally insulting her and praising himself at the same time.
Oh, yeah. And he just keeps going, talking about how Lady Catherine would love Elizabeth, how marrying him would be the best thing for her family. He's so stuck in his own world, he doesn't hear how rude and condescending he sounds.
And that's where Austen is so brilliant. She uses humor to show us, how hypocritical and just absurd social rules can be and how we all see things differently. But it's not just funny. There's something deeper there. Mr. Collins, he's a joke, but he represents a real danger for women like Elizabeth, women who are expected to just say yes for practical reasons, not for love.
It's a good reminder that even with all the witty jokes and romance, Austen is dealing with some serious stuff. Gender roles, social class, and all the pressure to fit in.
Absolutely. And Elizabeth refusing Mr. Collins, that's a huge statement. She's saying no to all those rules. She won't settle for a life that's empty. But it comes with a price, right? She makes her mother mad and maybe risks her whole future.
And that's what keeps you hooked on Pride and Prejudice. That tension between what you want and what society expects. Austen makes us face those hard questions, makes us think about what we would do. And we've just scratched the surface here.
Oh, there's so much more to talk about. Wickham's tricks, Darcy being so mysterious, and those social pressures just crushing everyone.
The roller coaster. Emotions, social commentary, the whole works. Can't wait to see what happens next.
So we left off with Elizabeth really standing up for herself by rejecting Mr. Collins. But Austen, she loves to shake things up. Elizabeth's celebrating her freedom, right? And then her best friend Charlotte makes this crazy decision, accepts Collins' proposal. Talk about a twist.
Right. It's like Austen's throwing this curveball, let's see how you handle this, because on the surface, it just seems like Charlotte's betraying everything Elizabeth believes in. About love, about marriage. You'd think, being such good friends, Charlotte would get it. Support Elizabeth's view.
And that's why this part is so brilliant. It makes you think, look past your first reaction. Think about Charlotte's situation. She doesn't have many choices. And in that society, marriage, that was the only way for a woman to be financially secure. Charlotte's not like a dreamer like Elizabeth. She sees marriage practically a way to have a comfortable life.
Yeah, but you still feel bad for her. She's basically saying goodbye to any passion, any real intellectual connection. With Mr. Collins, of all people, it's like trading a beautiful garden for a dusty old library. Safe, predictable, but not exactly exciting.
And that's the contrast Austen wants us to see. Elizabeth, she's going for love, personal happiness. Charlotte, she's accepting how limited things are. Their choices show us the tough spot women were in back then. It wasn't always about finding true love. Sometimes it was about just surviving.
It's a harsh reminder, how society can just box you in. Makes you think, will Charlotte ever be happy in this marriage, this deal she made? But while all this drama is happening at Longbourn, Austen gives us a break. Elizabeth's aunt and uncle, the Gardiners, arrive.
Ah, the Gardiners. They're more than just, nice relatives. They're from a whole different world. Less about status, more about real connection, enjoying the mind, thinking about things. They show Elizabeth there's more out there than Longbourn and all the marriage craziness.
And they're so great to Elizabeth and Jane, like how Mrs. Gardiner tries to gently, guide Elizabeth about Wickham and Darcy. She doesn't push her, but she hints that maybe Wickham's not the angel he seems.
Exactly. The Gardiners, they challenge Elizabeth's ideas. They've known Darcy a long time. And what they say about him, it goes against Wickham's story. It's like Austen's making Elizabeth doubt. Like, look closer, question what you believe.
And speaking of questioning things, they arrive just as we find out Bingley's not coming back. Caroline Bingley sent in that letter, full of fake worry for Jane, little digs about her social status. It's so obvious she's trying to keep Jane and Bingley apart.
Oh, classic social maneuvering. Caroline's the worst kind of climber, using manipulation, little insults to get ahead. And poor Jane, she's so kind, so innocent, she doesn't even see it coming.
Breaks your heart seeing her hopes crushed. She's trying to be so strong, so brave. But Elizabeth, bless her, she sees right through Caroline. She knows Jane deserves better than being some second choice. And Elizabeth's anger at both Caroline and Bingley. You can just feel it.
And that anger, I think it's more than just protecting her sister. It's like Elizabeth's starting to lose faith in this whole idea of romantic love. First, there's Charlotte, making that practical choice. Now Bingley, just letting his sisters control him. It makes her wonder, can real love even exist? In a world where money and status are all that matter.
It's like she's seeing behind the curtain, realizing how easily love can be twisted. And this feeling of disappointment, I think it makes her even more vulnerable to Wickham.
Yeah, exactly. Bingley's gone, Jane's heartbroken. So Wickham comes in, all charming, paying attention to Elizabeth, makes her hate Darcy even more. He's playing the long game, right? Showing himself as the better choice, while making sure Elizabeth sees Darcy as the bad guy.
He's pulling all the strings, playing with Elizabeth's emotions, while messing with what she thinks of Darcy. Austen's so good at showing how manipulative people can be. It's fascinating, but scary, too.
What's really smart is how Austen uses different language for Wickham and Darcy. Wickham, it's all charm, flattery, words to make him seem like the good guy, and Darcy the villain. But Darcy, he's reserved, awkward, his words are blunt, they make him seem arrogant, mean, even when he might not be.
It's like they're speaking different languages. Darcy's being real, maybe too real. But Wickham, he's a master of deception. Words are just his tools.
And this, how differently they talk, it points to another big theme. Appearance versus reality. Wickham's an expert at looking good, hiding his real motives. Darcy, he can't seem to express himself, so people misunderstand him, misjudge him.
Like, don't judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a man by his words. But Elizabeth, she's so prejudiced against Darcy. And Wickham's so charming, she misses all the signs, she's falling for him, and her aunt's worried sick.
Mrs. Gardiner's got reason to worry. She sees Elizabeth's falling for Wickham, and he has no money, no status. It's that classic thing. An aunt trying to protect her niece from a bad relationship. But Elizabeth, she's caught up in her feelings. She's sure Wickham's good. Didn't hear her aunt's warnings.
And then, just when you think things can't get crazier, Austen throws another twist. Someone shows up at the Netherfield ball. But before we get to that dramatic entrance, let's think about how Austen uses the setting. To make these chapters even more intense.
Oh, yeah, the setting's important. Longbourn, it's so stuffy. All these reminders of Jane's heartbreak. It shows you how limited their world is. But the Gardiners, they bring this feeling of freedom, of fresh air. Like there's a whole world beyond Meryton.
And the Netherfield ball, it's like a little version of their whole society, Appearances are everything. Social rules are strict, and everyone's trying to manipulate each other. The perfect place for Wickham to shine and for Darcy to look even worse.
It's like Austen's putting all these characters, all this tension on stage, ready for this big confrontation that'll change everything, but we'll have to save that for next time. For now, think about this. Knowing how manipulative Wickham is, how Darcy struggles to connect with people, how do you think that meeting at the ball will go? Will Elizabeth finally see Wickham for who he really is, or will her prejudice blind her to the truth?
So last time we were talking about Wickham, totally winning over Meryton. And Elizabeth's falling for him hard. Then, bam, Mr. Darcy just, like, walks into that ball at Netherfield. Like, he owns the place. What an entrance.
Oh, it's so deliberate. Austen's a genius, right? She brings Darcy back at the worst possible moment, socially speaking. Everyone's forced to deal with him, especially Elizabeth, and she still thinks he's like the big bad wolf. Ruined Jane's chances, did Wickham dirty, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and Darcy's not exactly helping himself. He's being polite, but distant. Talks to people, but doesn't, open up. Like he's walking on eggshells, wearing a full suit of armor. He even dances with Elizabeth, but it's all like these little digs, this tension. You can tell there's a lot going on under the surface.
That dance is huge. It's like all their emotions all tangled up. They're attracted to each other, but their pride, their prejudices, it keeps them apart. Like they're trying to solve a mystery, but neither one will give up the clues.
And then there's Wickham, right? Master manipulator. He's watching them every move, like a shark, smelling blood in the water. He sees a chance to get even closer to Elizabeth and make Darcy look even worse. It's almost like he planned this whole thing, using the ball to show off and make Darcy look like the bad guy.
Oh, totally. Wickham loves this kind of scene. He's a comedian. He changes to fit in wherever he is. He knows how to act like the victim, how to butter people up. Words are his weapons. Darcy, he has zero game. He's honest, maybe too honest. And every time he tries to talk to Elizabeth, it comes out wrong.
Like he's speaking a foreign language. And Elizabeth, she's so prejudiced, she hears everything wrong. His quietness, his arrogance, his honesty, his meanness. Even when he's trying, she thinks he's insulting her.
This is where Austen uses that free indirect discourse thing. So smart. We're inside Elizabeth's head, seeing the ball through her eyes and her prejudices. They're like these colored glasses she's wearing. Everything's distorted. So she keeps misunderstanding Darcy and hating him even more. It's brilliant. How Austen shows us how tricky human perception is, how easily we can be wrong.
It's like she's showing us ourselves, how quick we are to judge. And Elizabeth's mistakes, they make us think. Are we judging people unfairly?
But even while Elizabeth's falling for Wickham's act, Austen reminds us there's more to the story. Remember the gardeners. They know Darcy, and what they say about him doesn't match Wickham's lies at all. It's like Austen's making us doubt, hey, maybe Wickham's not so innocent, maybe Darcy's not so bad.
It's a giant mystery, right? We're getting all these clues, but they don't fit. And just when we think we're figuring it out, Austen throws in a new twist. I don't want to spoil it, but that ball, it sets off this whole chain of events. Elizabeth's going to have to face her prejudices, question everything she thought she knew about Darcy.
That's what makes Pride and Prejudice so amazing. It's about love, society, how messy relationships are, but it's all about figuring yourself out. Elizabeth, through all her mistakes, she learns to see deeper, to question herself. And in the end, she realizes that Darcy, the guy she thought she hated, he's actually worth loving.
It's like growing up hurts, right? We all see things wrong sometimes. And true love, sometimes it comes from the places you least expect. So to everyone listening, as you keep reading, keep this in mind. Those little hints, the way people talk, how their views change. Because Austen's world, it's full of wisdom and wit, and it just gets you thinking about what it means to be human.